Tilly uses her magic stone to fly and gets a better view from above. She notices that these monsters are different from the ones they faced before. As a fish monster tries to attack a man, Ash quickly jumps in and demolishes it with a single swing of her sword. The man trembles at her sheer power. Another monster appears behind Ash, and the blonde witch quickly tells her sternly to pay attention. Ash once again calmly swings her sword again, slicing the monster in half with one stroke. She tells her friend not to worry about her, as she can handle herself. The other witch tells her friend to keep their guard up instead of squabbling. With that, Ash starts slashing down monsters left and right with incredible speed, so fast it's almost hard to keep up with. Meanwhile, Tilly notices that the ship is shaking. These fish monsters definitely couldn't be causing it, and she starts to worry that the tremors feel like huge monsters hitting the ship from underneath. If the shaking continues, their ship might be torn apart. Suddenly, the entire ship begins to shake violently, and everyone standing on it starts losing their balance. Tilly shouts that there's a big guy under the water, and it's probably trying to flip the ship. The ponytail witch decides to take action. Since the monster is hugging the ship's hull, she thinks she might be able to put up a shield to block its attacks. The ship's captain chimes in, saying that if it's as huge as Miss Tilly described, normal attacks might not be effective. He's unsure how they're supposed to fight a monster that big and massive. Just then, the blonde witch, who goes by the name Andrea, steps in and confidently tells everyone to leave it to her, because no one can match her shots. But they don't have much time, as the monster is already charging at them from behind. The ponytail witch quickly leaps into the air, using her magic to shield the ship from a giant attack. However, the effort takes a serious toll on her, and she starts coughing up blood, quickly falling down. Ash manages to push her back to safety with the rope that was tied to her. That is when Andrea jumps into the air and conjures a golden bow. She shoots an arrow that takes down the monster with a single hit. Ash is momentarily thrilled to see this, but her joy quickly fades when Andrea collapses into the water and begins to drown. Even though Ash always has beef with Andrea, she dives into the water to rescue her friend. The other witches are relieved because they won't have to swim to reach Border Town now. Tilly's glad they got out safely, but her confidence takes a hit when she sees the snow starting to fall. Early snow isn't exactly a good omen. The royal scholars once said that an early winter at Greycastle means demons are on their way, which means that the months of demons have begun. She mentions that it's still autumn and wonders if the border town is already under attack. As they approach solid land, the princess asks if this is where the witches got off last time. The captain nods, saying he remembers this spot because last time the border town had a giant balloon for transport. Tilly's pretty surprised to hear about the balloon, and Ash explains it flies with hot air and that Roland is the one who used the logic of hot air to make it happen. That's when Tilly realizes the royal scholars never taught them anything about this stuff, so she has no clue from where he picked up this knowledge. Whatever is the case, they will have to wait for the answers until they finally meet him, so she just tells everyone to reach the shore. Tilly then turns to the captain and asks him if he could stay here for 3 or 4 days, since she wants to send Lotus and the other witches back to the island. The captain agrees, saying he'd never dare to sail the dangerous sea without any of the witches. Once they finally make it to the solid ground, Tilly tells Shavi, the ponytail witch, to give the other witches a lift. Shavi uses her barrier abilities to create floating platforms for them, while Tilly just flies on her own with the help of her magic stone. Back at the border town, workers are struggling with the heavy snowstorm making their job tough. Meanwhile, Tilly and her crew arrive at the town and start walking across the bridge the prince built. They're absolutely blown away by the size of the bridge and can't help but wonder how much metal it took to build something so massive. Ash comments that the giant bridge seems like a waste of resources, because she thinks a pontoon would have been enough and wonders if there's really any business beyond the river's origin. Andrea chuckles at her remark, calling it foolish. She explains that even though she's not from Greycastle, she can see the value in the forests and uninhabited lands for territory expansion. A pontoon wouldn't handle the river's increased traffic, so a giant bridge makes more sense. Andrea adds that the prince must be smarter than everyone else here. Ash then points out how Andrea was trying to shame the prince not too long ago. As they approach the town, soldiers quickly stop them, questioning why they're coming from the south. One of the soldiers spots that they're witches, and Tilly proudly confirms it. The soldier happily tells them to wait there while he reports back to the castle that new witches want to join the witch union. Ash tries to explain Tilly's status, but the princess quickly stops her, telling the soldier that they will wait. Ash asks why they didn't just let the guards know their true identity. Tilly explains that she's curious about how the prince would react to a witch from an unknown origin. Just then, Nightingale appears, cheekily remarking that she heard there was a new witch, but didn't expect to see some familiar faces. Ash and Nightingale start catching up, while Tilly is absolutely amazed to see Nightingale. There's no doubt she's a combat-type witch and incredibly powerful. Nightingale then introduces herself to the princess and bows her head in respect, which takes Tilly by surprise. Once they make their way into the castle, Sylvie is absolutely thrilled to see Princess Tilly after a long time. She quickly hugs her, asking why she's here since it's still just autumn. Tilly reminds her that it's pretty much winter now. Princess then asks about the other witches, and Sylvie promptly updates her that Lotus is building houses for refugees. Evelyn and Candle should still be in the industrial district, and Honey is training messenger animals in the garden. The prince has already sent word for them to visit the castle. Right at that moment, Prince Roland walks in and tells Tilly that the other witches are on their way to the castle, as he has already informed them about her arrival. He then extends his hand and officially welcomes his dear sister to the border town. After a while, the siblings sit down for tea. Tilly reminds her brother that it's been a full year since they last met, and that they have a lot to discuss. Her brother agrees, saying he does have a lot to say, but he's not in a rush since winter will be long this year. Tilly keeps a close eye on him, and he starts to feel a bit nervous under her gaze. He calls out to Nightingale, who promptly appears. He tells her she doesn't have to hide since she's her sister, and asks her to leave the room. Once Nightingale is gone, the prince reassures his sister that they're alone. With that, Tilly's first question is to ask who he is exactly. The prince replies that he is her brother, the fourth Prince of Grey Castle. Looks like I will have to wrap this episode here, but I'm really interested to see when they're both going to share their knowledge of the ruins and piece everything together. Besides, they still have to rescue that witch stuck in the misty forest ruins, and I'm dying to hear more about these devils.
In the previous episode, when Prince finally met his sister, they were both about to have some interesting conversations. So, when Tilly asks her brother who he really is, he just replies that he's her brother in flesh, the fourth Prince of Grey Castle, Roland Wimbledon. He admits that he's changed a lot but is willing to explain everything slowly, starting from the moment he saved the witches. Once Prince is done explaining everything, Tilly quickly starts piecing things together in her mind. She thinks to herself that the witch named Anna must have triggered something in Roland, making him see through the church's evil deception. She is convinced that ever since Garcia made assassination attempts on him, he finally realized the power of royal families, and decided to change for the better if he wanted to win the crown. As she thinks this through, she finishes her tea, and Roland pours her some more. Tilly reflects that while it sounds a bit dramatic, it's still an explanation. However, she's still trying to wrap her head around the foreign knowledge he now possesses, like inventions such as the steam engine and rifles. She finally asks him outright if the reason behind his alien knowledge is that he suddenly gained a lot of memories. The prince agrees without a doubt, saying that after he dodged Garcia's attempt to kill her, the memories appeared when he woke up. If meeting with Anna was the start, then those memories would be the catalyst for his desire for change. Tilly then reflects once again, and remembers that Sylvie confirmed there aren't witches who can substitute or control others, and Roland Wimbledon is indeed the prince they knew. Plus, he's not a stranger to the Stone of Divine Punishment, and he always has knights to protect him, so the chances of a witch controlling him are minuscule. The Royal Library and scholars never mentioned anything about steam or snow powder, so she believes that his strange knowledge seems closely related to his unusual experiences. She then questions him once again, asking him how can he prove that he is Roland Wimbledon and all this knowledge is just from awoken memories. The prince grows quiet for a moment, then explains that he still remembers everything, and his own memories shape his conscience. If a witch were disguising herself as someone else, she wouldn't have that person's memories. Even though he has these new memories, he has no idea where they came from. He adds that he still remembers how she cried when he pushed her onto broken glass, and that's his proof. He also remembers that he never apologized for it, and hopes it's not too late for that. Tilly is at a loss for words, and finds it all unbelievable. The prince then reveals that in this world, everything looks surprising when you see them or experience them for the first time. He points out how he never expected his sister would be able to hide her witch awakening from everyone in the castle. But then again, he reminds her that this winter is going to be a long one, so they have a lot of time to talk about everything. Tilly agrees and says that she'll be under his care for the next few months. After his sister's intense questions, the prince finally relaxes and reflects that he's glad all the Slumber Island witches returned to the castle after their tour to the town, which gave him reason to end that heavy conversation. It's really stressful to lie to someone's face when they're smart, especially while trying to maintain an honest expression. Just then, Nightingale pops up and asks if he feels strange witnessing his sister as a witch. The prince says he was just pressured with all of her questioning, and that's all. Nightingale mentions that she thought it would be a touching reunion since he met his sister after a long time. The prince then points out that he doesn't have a good relationship with her. He often bullied her in the castle, and they were pretty much strangers as they grew older, so it's quite surprising she even came here to meet him. She then leans in closer and reminds him how he told her to go outside, even though he never meets any other witches alone, which makes Nightingale believe that he must trust his sister. My guy just turns his head away with a sheepish look on his face. The fact that he sent the Nightingale outside was because he did not want her to detect his lies. He might have told her to his sister. And right now, he is also trying his best to not make eye contact and to avoid speaking any lies. He simply tells her that she will understand someday. But Nightingale just keeps pressing, inching closer and asking him if he'll tell her everything. The prince stutters in response, and she takes it as a positive sign, deciding to wait for the day when he finally tells the truth. Later, we see Lightning and Maggie calling everyone into the dining hall, where a spread of delicious food has been laid out. All the witches gather in, with Wendy personally escorting Princess Tilly to the dining room. The new witches are amazed at how much grander the food looks compared to usual. Even Ash can't help but smirk, feeling proud of Bordertown's hospitality. Her smirk is just to tease her blonde friend, who was doubtful about Bordertown and its prince. Wendy shows everyone their way to the seats, and after a while, they are all done eating. The prince asks if the food was to their liking, to which Ash simply replies positively. Meanwhile, Tilly wipes her lips with her handkerchief and reminds the prince that, besides helping Bordertown fend off the demons, she's also here to retrieve their witches. Since a group of civilians will be coming to the Slumber Island from Silver Bay in the spring, she needs Lotus and Honey to help them with food and shelter. Hearing this, the prince reflects on the First Army, which is enough to handle the demons without needing witch help. However, he still needs Lotus and Honey's help for infrastructure building. The pier by the mountains isn't finished, and the docks are only halfway done, so they still need more houses. The prince asks if the departure could be delayed by half a month. Princess Tilly explains that under normal circumstances, she wouldn't have any objections, and would be fine with that. However, a type of fish monster has appeared in the southern seas, and she suspects it has something to do with the early months of demons. As the months go on, the strength of the demons will increase, so she'd prefer they leave earlier for everyone's safety. Sister Breeze will escort them by ship, as her abilities are perfect for dealing with demons that lack much intelligence. The prince then asks if, apart from Lotus and Honey, the other three witches can stay a little longer since their education is only halfway through, so it would be a waste for them to leave now. Tilly perks up at seeing her brother concerned for those witches, and she's now curious about how he plans to utilize Candle and Evelyn's abilities. The prince explains that he needs both of them for solidifying metal parts and brewing. You see, Candle can greatly increase machinery efficiency, while Evelyn's alcohol is very useful for many purposes beyond just consumption. His sister then explains that they have always felt insecure about the usefulness of their abilities, so she's glad to hear that he values them. She appreciates that the prince recognizes their abilities as crucial because she's always believed that no ability is ever useless. She then turns to the witches and asks for their thoughts on whether they want to leave. The little one says she's fine with either place, while Evelyn states that if Miss Tilly needs her back on Slumber Island, she'll gladly go. However, she wouldn't mind staying in Bordertown either, as she still has a lot to learn from Miss Scroll. Princess Tilly reassures her, saying she doesn't need to be so nervous and that they can choose whatever they want without feeling pressured. She explains that she just wants to know about everyone's experiences living in the town, and they can go back to Slumber Island or come to Bordertown at their own will. She would also love for other witches from Bordertown to visit Slumber Island as well. The prince agrees, saying he hopes that witches can freely live in both places with their combined efforts. Tilly perks up at her brother's pleasant thoughts and states that she's glad he feels the same way. Roland is startled for a moment to hear this, because the last time she called him brother was nearly a decade ago. But then he regains his composure and tells her that the day will come when they will live in harmony. He then decides to get back to the serious topic and mentions he's about to brief her on the ruins and the devils related to the Snowy Mountains and the stone towers he mentioned before. He explains that he was planning to send witches and First Army soldiers to the ruins in the Misty Forest for a rescue, but early winter delayed it. Tilly responds that she can't believe the legendary Devil Army could be so close, or that someone would still be in ruins that are 400 years old. She recalls the drawings of the devils he sent her, and thinks that this is what's most important right now. The prince points out that, based on the environment and their reactions, the devil territory has been there for many years. He suspects they haven't expanded into the kingdom due to the limitations of their red mist, so they're not a threat to Bordertown for now. He plans to build a scout tower to monitor their movements in the next couple of years. However, the sealed witch within the ruins is likely to reveal the truth behind Tequila and the fall of the church. Tilly agrees, but asks if there's any way to approach the ruins from the air instead of the land, as she's heard from Ash that Border Town has a tool for aerial transportation. The prince quickly realizes she must be talking about hot air balloons. He explains that although a hot air balloon can hold 10 people, it can be modified for more. However, bringing the first army soldiers through air would be impossible. If they encountered devils, they could suffer casualties, and with demons everywhere, it's just too risky. That's when Princess Tilly reminds him that it would have been fairly dangerous if he had gone with only the Witch Union. However, since she's here with other witches, it will be significantly safer. She explains that Xavi's barrier can block threats, and Ash can handle anything in close combat. The prince begins to think it over, and remembers that they were at a significant disadvantage in the air last time, but he can see the logic in what his sister is saying. Sylvie's magic sight can warn them of any dangers, and with Nightingale and Ash's powerful offensive abilities, even if things go wrong, Xavi and Anna can ensure everyone's safety. He then asks her if she's sure about going. Princess Tilly replies that she thinks this is a great opportunity to make sense of this mystery. Ever since the months came early and the demons appeared in the sea, she's had a bad feeling, and she's willing to go herself to uncover the truth. The scene then transitions to the Holy City. At the outskirts, we see knights guarding the walls, along with the two major archbishops. The old priest reminds Archbishop Maine that this winter is far too early, and there haven't been any records like this in the holy books either, and those were written by the Pope. Maine explains that while those books were written by the Pope, inaccuracies are unavoidable. They mostly track history in a general direction. Judging from the demons last year, he estimates they have about 10 years left to complete their goal. They plan to unify all 4 kingdoms in 2 years and grow the Divine Punishment Army in 8. By then, the Church's forces will be absolutely massive, and with Hermes' strong walls and strategic position, they'll protect this land until they make the enemy buckle. The old man sighs, saying he may be too old to witness this transition. He then asks about the snow powder recipe that Perov acquired and whether it has been tested yet. Maine explains that while the snow powder can be used for crowd control against demons, their true enemies are the devils. If they want to pierce through the devil's thick armor, they'll need to use a lot of explosives, and no one other than the Divine Punishment Army can throw such a massive amount of snow powder. The old man laments that there's no easy way to win against them. All they can do is confront them head-on. Suddenly, commotion erupts as people shout that 2 signals have been spotted, indicating multiple hybrid demons. They have no clue why there are so many since they're only in the first month of winter. Maine picks up his telescope and looks through it, while a soldier shouts that it's actually 3 signals, and the situation is even worse. Maine's eyes widen as he sees the sight before him. He recalls that the holy books have many records of reapers, nightmare beasts, and fanged devils. But what's mind-boggling is that these monsters, which were supposed to appear 5 years before the catastrophe, are showing up right now at Hermes. The scene transitions back to Border Town, where Honey and Lotus are about to depart for Slumber Island. They're thanking the prince for his hospitality over the past few months. The prince hands them a few gifts, saying this is just a small token of appreciation for their contributions to Border Town. The girls perk up in happiness, and Honey immediately starts to open her gift. However, Lotus reminds her that it's impolite to open gifts right away. When Honey finally unwraps it, she discovers a scarf and laments that she was expecting a bra instead. The prince explains that this is a scarf designed to protect her neck from the snow and cold, and if she wraps it a certain way, it can even cover her ears. Honey quickly puts it around her neck, and Lotus can feel the warmth radiating from it. Honey then notices there's something else inside the package and wonders if there's another gift. The prince encourages her to take it out, and when she does, she finds a shiny object that turns out to be a mirror. She gasps in surprise at how clearly she can see herself in it. Princess Tilly can't help but admit that this is a great place with running water and comfortable rooms. It's hard to believe that her brother transformed this desolate place into such a welcoming space. The prince asks if she regrets bringing the witches here, especially since everyone is enjoying living here more than Slumber Island. To which Tilly replies that she doesn't regret it at all if it means they can have better lives. She reminds him not to forget that she is a witch as well. The prince then asks if she's really going to join them on the trip to the Misty Forest ruins. He admits that while she is a transcendent, her abilities are not suited for combat. Tilly assures him that she can hold her own. To drive her point home, she takes out her red stone and demonstrates by shooting lightning from her hands. She proudly explains that this is a magic stone she found in some ancient ruins. The prince is quite amazed and asks if this means she can use 2 abilities at once. Tilly shakes her head with no. Apparently, the stones only allow 1 ability to be used at a time, and if she tries to channel magic through 2 stones at once, nothing will happen. She admits that she didn't want to reveal this to him so soon, but after their discussion last night, she realizes she may have been too harsh on him. But she now feels happy that he's being honest about the ruins. The prince just waves her off, saying there's nothing to worry about since he understands. Tilly then asks what Honey meant about a bra. The prince feels a bit sheepish and tells her to just ask Sylvie or Evelyn about it. Tilly looks puzzled and wonders aloud why it seems like he's still keeping things a secret from her. As the witches experience flying in hot air balloons for the first time, the siblings talk about the mysteries and tensions between the church and ruins, and why the church is trying to hide the evidence of their existence. They realize that not only do the church records stop about 400 years ago, but they're also vague about the origins of God. There are no myths, epics, or titles aside from describing his omnipotence, and there are way fewer details than there are about the three gods of the Bay. Tilly points out that it feels like the church just sprang up out of nowhere in the kingdom. Later, when the prince is alone in his office, his mind is still occupied with these thoughts. He compares the church to the religions of his old world, where it's pretty much a given that deities are tied to the creation of the universe. Every religion claims their god created the world, with things like Genesis, karma, or some full record of creation being a staple in every belief system. Suddenly, Kyle Sitchy bursts into the room, revealing that he's got a lead on manufacturing acid. The prince perks up, excited by the news, and eagerly asks about the process. The mad scientist grins and says it's all thanks to Charles. Charles then starts explaining, but since we're not here for a science lesson, I'll spare you the details, especially since these shitty translations aren't accurate. One thing's for sure though, the acid they're producing is super pure, and it even gives off fumes like it was described in Chemistry 101. They go on about more of this technical stuff, but the prince lets us know that they're using one of the oldest manufacturing methods. The issue back then was that sulfuric acid couldn't be stored properly since there weren't containers that could handle the corrosion, so it got phased out. But that's no problem for the prince. In Bordertown, they're already producing sulfuric acid slowly using nitric acid. As for the corrosion issue, Soraya's paint can handle it without a hitch. The prince gives them props for a job well done, admitting he can't believe they stumbled upon this method. Kyle Sitchy grins and shares that he's always had great luck, even back when they were in Redwater. He mentions how he managed to pull this off at barely 20 years old, much to the envy of the older folks in their 30s and 40s. The prince nods, stating that he'll assign some witches to help arrange the equipment. He also mentions wanting to scale things up. Now that they've got a reliable source of nitric acid, the next task is producing something very dangerous, which is nitroglycerin. He explains that this experiment will be dangerous since it can cause an explosion with a minor change in temperature, but he assures Sitchy that he will send Anna over to take care of it. Sitchy looks intrigued and fascinated, clearly excited about what they're about to experiment with. The prince can't help but grin, thinking about how 9 out of 10 chemists have a knack for explosions, so he is sure that a few explosions should not be a big deal for someone like Kyle. He knows that if nitroglycerin is combined with nitrocellulose or nitrostarch, it'll enhance its explosive properties. The former is a smokeless powder, while the latter is a rare, powerful explosive. The key to creating something incredible is already in his hands.